an amazing conversation for you this morning. Some great content that we've programmed around one of the big themes that we see emerging this year, which is mobility, and particularly as it relates to millennials, which is of great interest to many of you guys in the audience. We have an amazing panel. They're all going to introduce themselves in a sec, and we have the amazing Angela Steele, who runs Ansible, which is Media Brand's mobile unit. She's going to moderate the conversation. But before we get to that, we're very lucky to have Nada Stahl here, who's Intel's mobile marketing lead, who's going to share some thoughts.
All right, so what I want to talk to you about, I just want to give you some thoughts about how we approach marketing communications at Intel and what's really top of mind for us, especially as when we move into 2014. We really believe that marketing is really shifting. So what we used to know as traditional marketing is really no longer relevant, at least for us at Intel. So just some thought starters, kind of going back in time, if we had a time machine. If you think about the 1950s, there were about 6 cable channels that consumers could choose from to consume information and their entertainment. Today there's over 500. You think about magazines, there's over 5,500 publications out there. So a lot of consumer choices. And you start to think about even radio, you start really getting into the thousands, which is only 2 decades ago, there were 1,000 radio stations. Today there's over 11,000 of them. And so you can start to kind of see how there's tremendous growth in media options for consumers today. Then you start to think about mobile. I mean, today we get into the millions. There's 1.5 million mobile apps out there today. And if you start to look at the digital landscape altogether, there's over 644 million websites. So how do we as marketers really determine how to get our message to our consumers? It's challenging, but at the same time, I think it's really exciting and provides some opportunities for us. Your average consumer is actually exposed to about 1,200 messages a day. That's about 1 ad from a brand every minute that they're awake. That's pretty substantial. And we think about and talk about this a lot at Intel, which is there's a lot of noise in the marketplace. And how do we truly break through with our message in a relevant way so we can capture our audience's attention? It's become very, very challenging. And we have to work a lot harder as marketers to make sure that we're doing a really good job of reaching our audience. So technology is really empowering consumers to control media. We believe that consumers live in a device-agnostic world. They want content, and they want it on any device at any minute of the day. And what they do is they go from their tablet to their smartphone to their television, and they just expect content to be there in a consumable way. And I think, again, it really does create an opportunity for us as brands to think about how do we deliver our content in a seamless manner to our consumers. And they're truly influential. Today, your average consumer is consuming 100% more content than they did in 2010. So they expect content at the tip of their finger, anytime, anywhere, any place. And that's why mobile is extremely important. Okay, let's talk about millennials. At Intel, we think a lot about millennials, and we actually tap into the millennials that work for our company, and we get their opinions all the time. We know that if we don't win the hearts and minds of millennials, we are not going to be successful as a company, period. So why are millennials so important? First of all, I want to share the stat with you. 53% of them rather lose their sense of smell than lose their technology. I mean, that's just a little crazy, right? Yeah. That's what they say. Yeah.
Go either way.
Yeah. We're talking about an audience. We're also talking about an audience that's extremely connected and diverse. So about a month ago, I spent some time in China. And I was really curious about the differences of millennials in China versus the US. So I started to kind of watch their patterns on the bus, on the trains, in the coffee shop. And what I recognize is that even thousands of miles away, millennials are so global. I mean, they were watching movies on their iPads. They were listening to music on their smartphones, you know. I mean, they have so many more similarities today across oceans and countries than we ever thought. And guess what? They like The Voice, and they like their version of American Idol. And so we really have to think that they're educated, they are diverse, they're international. The other thing about millennials is that they're extremely influential. So we know that even if they're not in the market to purchase a product today, guess what? They influence what their parents buy, they influence what their grandparents buy, as well as they're influencing their circle of friends and social network. So they are very, very important. And even going back to when Facebook started, who were the first ones to embrace Facebook? It was millennials. That's how it started, right? So I think we need to, this is why we really think highly of millennials and how important they are. And you know, the last point I want to make is, again, they didn't know a time where the internet didn't exist, right? This is their world. They embrace technology. They're trendsetters, really important. So we have to keep that in mind. Kind of moving into how we're thinking about marketing. We really believe that the traditional way of putting your message in the marketplace in a push methodology doesn't really work anymore. Millennials are consuming less and less television today than they did even a few years ago. Actually, they're consuming content like in the format of video on smartphones. That's kind of the biggest opportunity that we're seeing. So there's truly a shift in how they're consuming content. And again, we really believe that just putting a message out in the marketplace in the traditional way is not really going to do the job for us. So what are we doing at Intel about it? We're moving away from this idea of exposure or push marketing, where you as a brand put your message out in the marketplace and hope that a percentage of your audience is going to understand what you're communicating, and then hopefully that's going to lead to a sale at some point, right? No. That doesn't, for us, work anymore. We really think it's about participation, engagement, bringing value to our millennials. And how we do that is really with quality content that's entertaining or educating, depending on our message and what we're trying to communicate. So we're really shifting our way. The good news is that the new way of marketing is really working for us. We believe that participation drives results. So when we get in the space of social and native and really delivering content in a more natural, organic way to our consumers, it's really driving better and better results. And these are just some stats. Ad awareness, message association, and purchase intent is so much higher when you're talking about native and video. And so that's really the space we're going to be playing in. We actually don't really believe that banners work, digital banners. So we're completely shifting away from banners. The last thought I just want to leave you with is sort of the future. I mean, we know that in 2014 we're going to be focused on video, we're going to be focused on native. But where is the future of marketing? And we believe that wearables is going to play an important role. And it's up to us as marketers to really determine how we leverage wearables. You know, big data is a very hot topic, right? Everybody talks about big data in different ways. It means different things to different people. So how do we start to gain better understanding of our millennials through wearables to be able to reach them more effectively? And what's the opportunity in advertising with wearables? I don't think anybody knows today, but I think it is up to us marketers to determine what that is. And that's it, and I will leave you with this quote. And unless you have any questions, I will hand it over to Angela.
Thank you so much, Netta. We will have time for Q&A at the end. And so please join us in the panel. We'll go ahead and get started with that. And we're also going to, we want this to be informal and interactive. So as we go through, you're all part of the panel as well. If you have a question or a comment, chime in. You don't have to save your questions for the end. So with that, we'll let the panelists introduce themselves, but I just have to say I'm really excited about this group because we have an amazing cross-representation of expertise here. We have people who are experts in developing content for millennials, for creating products and product strategy for millennials, for having technology out there that millennials use. And a millennial, maybe more than one millennial, I didn't ask everyone's age, but at least one millennial up here themselves. So a good cross group. And with that, I'll let, which one? I'll let each of you introduce yourself very quickly for the sake of time, who you are, what you do, and what you're most excited to see here at CES.
Great. I'm Paul Longhenry. I run business development and strategy for a company called Tapjoy. We're a mobile advertising network. For those of you who haven't worked with us, we basically operate a network of native advertising that's integrated into about 8,000 mobile applications, principally entertainment apps. And our advertisers are effectively embedded in a sponsorship manner into these apps. So basically, your ads are engaged with, and then you unlock content in those apps for the consumers. It's actually integrated into the economies inside of these applications. And it works really well. Consumers love it. We started about 4 years ago. Today, we're reaching about 450 million monthly active users around the world, and it drives a lot of the economy in games and entertainment applications. In terms of what I'm most interested at this show, I think there's been a lot of talk over the last maybe year and a half about kind of the two-screen experience and how entertainment content is consumed in the living room with a mobile device, and we're starting to see some really interesting innovation with connected TV applications where the same media properties are producing connected experiences, and for us, that gives us an opportunity to bring sponsorship to that as well.
Great.
All right. I'm Tommy St. George. I'm from Gumbo Live, which is a think tank in New Orleans in the French Quarter. Some of you guys have already been down. We're an outfit of 12 or 13 people. I can't remember at this point, but we're a diverse group of like emerging talent working for Initiative and a couple of media brands companies, and from industrial designers, mechanical engineers, all non-industry talent trying to get together in the same room to produce new ideas for our clients. So.
And what you're most excited to see at CES?
Oh, that's being here. I was most excited to be here. No, just to really just. I was to see Chris, but.
You're done.
But yeah, no, I nailed it.
I'm Stuart Stone. I'm from Vice Media. My job is mostly concerned with creating branded content, working with brands to make content for millennials. We're a global youth media company. What I'm most excited about is distribution, content, video in particular, and how it's threading through devices, platforms, and different consumer experiences. That's going to play into the conversation here today, but that's a big question for me in particular.
Great.
And I think I was introduced, so.
I'm Wesley Barrow. I'm a co-founder of Nomi. It's a smart sensor technology we put inside brick and mortar retail, and we tie it to a web dashboard. So we're basically trying to build out omniture for the physical world, where you can measure the impact of marketing campaigns and in-home, out-of-home activity against actual foot traffic in stores. So it's kind of bringing Internet of Things to the physical retail world. So it's pretty exciting. About a year and a half old, and excited to be at our first CES. And I guess things I'm interested in out here, I think what Intel's doing with wireless charging is pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. Love that. And then the Oculus VR headset, I'm pretty excited about too. Yeah. So.
Well, my name is Hakan. I'm with Panasonic Automotive Systems, and I really like your presentation. There was a minute when I saw the sense, I was disagreeing. I thought you were talking about common sense, but that was not the case. It was a sense of smell, so I think we're on the same page. I am based in Silicon Valley with the Panasonic other domains. We have many domains, and I hope it'll come out. Connectivity mobile is not just the phone. There are a lot of entities to it, from avionics, automotive, home, car, hotel, motel, airport, and also retail. And one of the things what we like now is the wearables and the personalization. I think things that you do fit into very nicely, and work very closely with Intel as well. So also Qualcomm is a new initiative. I hope we'll talk about that a little bit. All joined devices working together, a lot of contextual intelligence.
Yes, great. Well, thank you. So Hakan, we will start with you.
Sure.
Netta did a great job of sharing with us and sort of setting up the impact of technology on millennials. In your role of product strategy, I'd love your perspective on how millennials are influencing technology.
Sure. Well, first of all, from our point of view in automotive domain, especially in overseas, in Asia, we have a problem also in Europe too. People don't buy cars anymore. You talked about what they would like to do. They would rather be in this virtual world. But in US, eventually they come to an age, and we just have an 18-year-old. She didn't want to drive years and years, but now she sees that even though she could send messages to be with somebody, she has to drive because we're not driving her all the time. So nevertheless, car in US lifestyle plays a key role as far as mobility. Car also has a brand element, whether it's the Scion or BMW and so on and so forth. So one thing with millennials with CES, they don't want to pay for anything. And that's bad news. That's bad news for us. And you can blame on Google. You can blame on Google. Basically, they are so used to getting things free, they don't have any patience, and they move around quite a bit. So it's very difficult to sustain a business, even for Facebook. They came first, they'll leave first. So our daughter doesn't use Facebook anymore. The minute we went in, she was out. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
So I think from the car point of view, from our point of view, millennials also are into multitasking much more than we do. So we are much more conservative. Also the privacy for us, for some of us, are more important. When you talk to millennials, they are like, what do I get back? So from their point of view, they're very open to share. And also, I hope we'll talk about it a little bit today, they want to generate their own content. And as Panasonic, we want to enable that, have the platform, not only the cameras, but wearable devices at all places. And I think they want to create their own brands too, in their own world. So you have to make them part of this marketing strategy. They're not on the receiving end anymore. They're also on the participation, and you said engagement. So they want to be part of this, I wouldn't say money system, but almost like an electronic point system. So I hope we can talk about some of those too later.
I love the point you mentioned about they want to be content creators, which, Stuart, this brings me to you. I mean, Vice is all about creating content for this millennial generation. They're on multiple devices. They're getting information from all different sources. They're creating content themselves. What challenges does that pose to you as a content provider designed for millennials, and how do you take advantage of it?
It doesn't pose a problem for us. I think we're excited to be in the mix. There's always going to be a space for a leader and for someone leading with quality. You mentioned The Voice or something like that. It's not going anywhere. People want to watch this stuff. Yeah. They want to have ways of contributing to that conversation in a credible way. But yeah, it's important to make stuff that stands out and leads the conversation first as well.
Yeah, so what is the, for brands, when you're working with brands, what do you advise? How can they get involved in the content creation?
Well, I mean, I think that in most cases they should. Usually I advocate going into it slowly if they haven't before. The best projects that we do are with brands, and Intel would be an example of companies and brands that really know what their assets are and what's great and what's exciting to them, and to be able to take those and incorporate it into what they're making. I mean, it just translates better and ends up with a better product, something more effective.
Sure. So, Paul, we've heard that millennials don't like paying for anything. How does that work into what you're doing at Tapjoy, and does it create, again, challenges or opportunities?
I mean, I think it creates a great opportunity. Digital advertising traditionally is considered an annoyance by most consumers, right? Whether we're ignoring it on a browser or we're ignoring a banner ad in an app. So you are sponsoring the content one way or the other. You just don't get any credit for it. So given that they aren't going to pay for it, at least you kind of turn it into an explicit model where I'm going to choose the brand I want to engage with, and I appreciate it. I get some value in exchange for my time. So I think in general it's actually a really good thing for brands to get front and center in front of the consumers that are kind of choosing your message. Just to go back a little bit into the content creation piece, one of the more successful apps that we were involved with in early 2012 was called Draw Something. I'm sure some of you have played it or have kids who have played it. It was produced by a company in New York, eventually acquired by Zynga. but it was, we were integrated in it such that people, it was kind of like Pictionary, if you remember playing Pictionary. Brands would basically sponsor your ability to get, new drawing utensils or new colors. And another thing that Zynga did really interestingly on their own is they would bring brands in and run contests, like draw the Intel logo, for incremental prizes. So there was a lot of brand integration. At the same time, consumers were doing a lot of the content creation themselves. It was really good.
Okay. So Tommy, we're about to reveal your identity as our litmus test for millennials. Based on the things that... I
represent all of them.
All of them. So can you share with us just your reaction to what you're hearing?
Yeah, well, I think if there's one thing that defines us millennials, I think it's growing up with tools to edit, create, and manipulate our world, or at least think that we can, because that world might be small. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter. We interact with it, we can adjust it, filter this, filter that. All that stuff kind of hardwires us to want to create things and create our world everywhere. And so with brands, we want to be not just a part of the conversation. We want to, we want to create the brand ourselves. We want to not only hear what they're saying, we want to be saying it for them, because though we support them, shouting isn't good anymore. It's got to be about doing things first and telling a story afterwards. And the best way to tell a story is have others tell it for you.
Yeah. So we're hearing this recurring theme that they want to be creating content. They want to be helping brands tell their story. I'd like to go back to you, Hakan, and share with us. You had mentioned that the point about connecting all of the screens and providing content for them. Can you tell us more about how you're doing that and what you think a role for a marketer can be?
Sure. Well, first of all, each of us have a brand relationship. And some brands, we call it a brand circle, just around me as Hakan. And what do I do? Delta, Avis, so on and so forth. Those are the things that I live by, and I collect the points and so on and so forth. Otherwise, I get in trouble. So the point is, in that kind of contextual environment, there's some value with these intimate brands. And outside, there's some other brands that maybe not so relevant. Now, car purchase, for example, gets into right in that circle. If you buy a Scion, if you buy a BMW, 35% of the vehicles have a brand element. Maybe Toyota Corolla, not so much, but Mustang, definitely. So those are the entry points in Panasonic. This is for Panasonic Automotive. For Panasonic Avionics, in-flight entertainment systems, they completely work on airlines directly. If somebody is a Delta medallion, that person has a special lifestyle. An airline knows exactly what that person is. So our strategy is contextually brand that personalization around the person. And then what happens is, the perks, we call it start to flow to you in a much more meaningful way. And that's what millennials want. They don't want to be bombarded with things that is not relevant to them. Panasonic just acquired a company, internet radio company from Germany. And we did lots of focus groups on that. It was so interesting for me too. Millennials don't listen radio anymore. The only reason is advertising. That's the first reason. For them, it's a waste of time. It's annoying. It irritates them. They're a little bit anti-system also. So the personalization piece starts from our point of view, from the brand selection and the brand association. And then we do the cross-branding. And then with that cross-branding, if you are a brand maybe complementing certain elements, then you fit in nicely, let's say BMW 1 Series owner. And it comes with that lifestyle. And the problem is, advertising for any of us, the real goal is engagement. At the end of the day, we call it infotisement. It's advertising plus information. We used to have infomercial, but that's a little bit overused, so similar thing. But the point is, in the car, if you're making a search, chances are you're going to buy something. That's why the Google and Apple are trying to get into car search. And if you're searching from the airplane, you're flying to a certain city. If you do a search, chances are you're going to act on it.
Yeah.
So from the millennials' point of view, they don't want to pay for that service. They want to get the special perks. And then they want micropayments to walk around. And then that's what I mean. They don't want to pay for it, these indirect business models. And that's what I think we have to be very creative. And you have to be very intelligent to get into that kind of business sense.
Yeah. So this is such a great segue to Wesley. You mentioned a phrase, what was it? Not
infotisement.
Infotisement. Using information and data. Wesley, your company, correct me if I'm wrong, but you originally exist to provide data and information and insights to retailers, but of course that leads to marketing opportunities for non-retailers as well as retailers. Can you share with us a little bit about the types of opportunities that you're doing? Maybe even share an example?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because retail was definitely the first vertical we were going after, in an outbound sense. But actually, our fastest growing category right now is automotive, because what we found is since we're getting all this really interesting data out of, brick and mortar locations, the things we're getting are, device IDs of anonymous people who walk in the store if they have their Wi-Fi turned on, for example. Or with our new Bluetooth beacon product coming out actually tomorrow, we're going to be integrating with mobile apps so that you can create a custom one-to-one experience with anyone who's downloaded your app when they walk into a store. But the big thing that's been a killer feature for the last year has been the way we've measured events. So with a lot of our auto customers, we'll put sensors out, for example, at a mall where they may have a vehicle on display, capture all the anonymous people who go to the mall to look at that vehicle, and then measure it back to all the dealerships in that market to see what's the impact of people who went to that mall to look at that vehicle and then showed up to look at a car back at a dealership.
And you can do timely. That's important too. You may want to add.
Yeah, within a few months. Like we did another one for a retailer at Lollapalooza, where and this is another big one. Like music festival activations are huge, especially for millennials. Vice, you guys know all about that stuff. We'll put sensors out at tents where a retailer may sponsor. And for example, at Lollapalooza, there were like 30,000 unique device IDs that we saw over the course of the 3-day weekend. And we measured that back against one of our customers' 5 stores in Metro Chicago, and found that 1,300 net new customers were created from that event sponsorship that they put a few $100,000 into. And that was by looking at the number of people who went to the store for the 2 months before the festival took place, and then measuring the people who actually showed up at the festival, and then looked at the people who came within 3 months of the festival. And there were 1,300 people who had not been to one of the stores within the first 2 months, and then went to the festival and then came back within 3 months. That's awesome. So it's like, being able to actually have that one-to-one, causation has been really, really huge. And it's the same for like auto shows and for, really any type of like sample sales. Like there's never been a way to really quantify the impact of offline media spending before. And this is a really, really big breakthrough
So
for that.
May I say one thing?
Yes, please do.
Because this is a very good insight. I just want to add one thing. The real key, as you said, to do this in real time and convert marketing, advertising into real actions. To do that, time, space, and place are the key. It has to be at the right time so that you can act on it. So micro-location is very important. At the same time, the place, location is very important. Don't tell me something when I'm not there. Tell me something when I'm there. And then, of course, the space, whether you are in an airplane or car, the driver, hotel, those are very, very valuable.
Okay, we've struck a hot topic. I see hands in the audience.
Yeah, I have a question for Wesley.
Yeah.
How are you allowed to do this? Do you work with the NSA?
From a technical standpoint? No, I mean, if you think about it, it's the same thing as what's been happening online for 20 years. I mean, it's the idea of an offline cookie where, a device ID is fully anonymous. It's representative of a device, not a person. So we're able to get a hashed version of that device ID, and we can't lead it back. Like we get 0 PII. So it's fully, like even if we wanted to, we wouldn't know who that person was. And so all we're doing is just looking at an aggregate set of data of people who went to the event, and then matching that same set of data back to the data we get out of each store we're installed.
I would add too, I mean, the NSA story is actually a big reporting topic for our company. And we see that as they're as engaged and having the same feelings as people across the spectrum. But then again, they have grown up in this technical atmosphere where they expect things to be catered to them. What they're expecting though is for things to be magic. And it's true, they want the experience of things being tailored to them without feeling like it's a tricky line. So
no, and I mean so one of the things we're working on, which we'll be rolling out later in the year, will be the idea that you can actually start to retarget people who've been into different parts of your store. So imagine that you have sensors set up in 4 sections of a store, like men's, women's, home furnishings, and accessories, which is what one of our customers does have. That's how their store's zoned out. So imagine that if someone walked in a different section of the store and spent a certain amount of time, you go home and get on the web and you see an ad for that part of the store, for like a men's clothing item from that particular retailer. Like that's where we're heading, and we're going to make some announcements over the next few months that will, that's a big part of our roadmap is tying, the online world to the offline world by bridging the gap between your device and your persona if you've opted in.
So go ahead.
Just to comment on the privacy thing, obviously we get a ton of data on a large number of consumers globally. So we were really involved in setting standards for device tracking, and the same device IDs that these guys are using. And particularly as it relates to millennials, effectively what we concluded was it wasn't so much about the data being collected as their ability to reset their ID if they want, just like deleting a cookie. So as long as they've got the ability to get private if they want to, most of the concerns went away.
Yeah, and I would add, just as media companies' perspective, I mean, it's a process that we want to. It's obviously, I mean, this being able to track that one-to-one relationship through the path of purchase. We want to be able to help, and take whatever credit we can for it.
Absolutely.
But we also have to be aware that with a millennial audience, when they get served that ad from a particular sector of whatever retail store, they can make that connection. They have the most sensitive bullshit detectors, in the history of the world. And so if they get that read that we aided and abetted that creepy connection for them, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's only an area for us all to work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think good advertising you don't tend to notice as much as bad advertising. So if it's too targeted, it almost just feels natural, So we'll see. I mean,
or unnatural. Yeah.
There's a fine line for sure.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say it depends how you deliver. For example, make no mistake, every mobile device has a tracking. That's reality. Android platform, iOS, that's just the way it is. Now, the challenge is Google and Apple want to do this as a whole package, and you have all these connections through Google or iOS in that world, in that platform. The focus groups that we've done, that doesn't go well in human psychology. So what is now happening is you have to do some marketing partnership with certain brands that are relevant to that time. For example, we all flew here, we all have airline connections. So in this time window, if you get a message from airline, it makes perfectly sense because airline knows you're here. So in that sense, the message that is coming to you, if it fits into your lifestyle, if it's logical, contextual, so I completely accept Delta sends me an email, Delta knows I am here, I have a flight tomorrow, that's wonderful. And if it relates to what one of your partners, the channel is so important. But if I get hotel, get something based on where I walked at the casino, personally, I don't like it either. So that's the nuance.
I think that to sum up this discussion, it comes back to a point you made earlier, which is it's about the value exchange, especially for millennials. They're willing to give up a lot more information if they're getting value back. But if I'm a marketer, give me some guidelines around what that really means. What constitutes value in terms of what a marketer can provide to a millennial?
I'll start real quick. First of all, we have too much information we don't know what to do in our lives, all of us. So this is Panasonic Four Corners. Number two, we are so constrained on resources, time, all of us. We don't have enough time. Even if you have money, you don't have time. The third is everything's converging. There's no business, there's no private, there's no play, all that anymore because of the mobile devices. It's all coming together. Your life is bundled. And the last one is eco-sustainability. So around that, you have to give people what they need contextually, let them discover. Discovery is the biggest thing. If I discover something that I didn't know at the right time, and I feel special, whether I get my special coffee, whether the time or special something or show, that's what they want.
Tommy?
Yeah, I would say it's probably, one, I don't think we care much at all about being tracked. We freely volunteer. I mean, this is nothing new. We volunteer to check in here, blah, 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 for a free beer or whatever, Foursquare, or we're taking a picture of ourselves in the park with our dog on Instagram or whatever. Like, we're doing things, we're sharing things all the time constantly that have our location and what we're doing. If it gets us back into the real, I think that's one of the most important things for millennials. Yeah, we all think.
Mean?
So that, it's considered that, yeah, we want to stay in digital, we own more devices, all that stuff. But if you think about these great products like Instagram, they're just the manifestation of people doing things. They're just showing what they're doing. It gets them it allows them to share something of great value to them. So if it gets them outside and out of their normal way of life and it gets them back into something relationship-based, it's of huge value to them and gets them hooking up with friends and stuff like that. And also just, if it simplifies their life, I mean, I think we're minimalists at heart, and it's hard to judge based on all the things, all the hands or the hats we wear and all the pots we have our hands in and all that stuff. But it's so important for us to just have the least amount of things, the least amount, consuming the least amount of time. It's why we're flocking to Instagram and Snapchat. So they do one thing. You know, they do these one things, and they're not cluttered like Facebook. You know?
Just to comment on, in terms of where there's opportunities to add value, I think the one thing that is maybe more true of millennials than of my generation anyway is that it changes over time really, really quickly. So like the life cycle of content relevance is really short. We obviously work in a lot of mobile games. Like, you know, if you get a consumer a millennial to play for 4 weeks, it's a home run.
Yeah.
Right? You're just shifting between content sources all the time. And I think, you know, your point, Netta, about shifting between devices, it just kind of compounds the problem. They're shifting between devices and between different content.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think an average time frame for a piece of content is like 3 hours with millennials. I mean, the life shelf, it's so short. So it's like we always have to sort of be thinking about, you know, new content. I mean, you can't just throw content out there and hope it sticks for 2 months, right? Like it is really about relevant content at the right time, at the right place, and that cycle, especially on, you know, social networks like Twitter. I mean, the life shelf of Twitter is just so small.
How should marketing organizations that are traditionally set up begin thinking about how they structure, given the speed of change of content and the need to maintain the relevancy on a continuous basis? Because most structures that I've seen, and that are traditional in CPG at least, do not fit what you're talking about.
I mean, I can take that, at least for how we approach it at Intel. So, I mean, there's definitely church and state with PR, right, versus advertising. We all know that. However, we actually have a content creation team, which we call our newsroom. And a lot of these guys are creating content. I mean, again, depending on the campaign that we're running or what we're trying to do, we are churning content around pretty quickly because we have a team and that's all they do. And we, at the same time, are monitoring the performance of those content pieces. So we're really acting like a newsroom within a marketing organization, which has really sort of changed. That was never the case before. We just can't wait to.
The same goes for our agencies, creative agencies, the traditional agencies. Some IPG agencies are not set up to do what you're talking about. It's still it's like the world is changing. We're still sitting here with the same approach, unless we go to someone like Vice or where it's a different approach.
Well, and I would add that it's there's a single bit of nuance, and that it gets to a buzzword that's gets batted around a lot right now, which is real time, which of course is really important. That's the newsroom. You're interacting with people as things are happening, and it's important. But I think it needs to be balanced too with, if we're talking about value, with sort of more like right on time delivery. You also have to be thinking ahead of cultural events. In order to contribute to them, you kind of want to be able to make a statement ahead of it, and then be involved in the conversation as it unrolls.
And I would say one thing, to make it more effective, when we talk about big data, to make it contextual, semantic, time relevant and all that, you don't need a big data, but what you need is pieces of a small data from different places. And I think that's what marketing agencies don't know how to work with each other. But if they do work with each other, at the end of the day, everybody would win. But that's the problem we have, let's say, in automotive industry. You have Ford and GM, they're competing with BMW, Audi, and then at the same time, you have Samsung and Panasonic and mobile devices, and at the same time, there's Apple and Google, and then there's Facebook. So the game is getting very, very complicated. And I think few people will survive. And I think the business models are getting much more complicated. So advertising will be real dollars, so it'll be squeezed more. So I think you have to change the game, and they have to change the game as well.
Okay. Other questions from the audience? I'm getting the 5-minute signal. No other questions? Here's a question.
Aren't there really various forms of content? There's evergreen content, there's topical fleeting content. That evergreen content, you make a big investment in maybe some comedic clip, and you want to amortize that. Can you really tell when it's peaking or how to reintroduce into distribution to give it a second life, some shelf life to this investment?
I would say, I mean, the second part of your point can you tell when it's re-entering or peaking? I mean, that's a huge focus for us. Because really, you do create something and you put it online, and it can have several phases of life. A big story for us, I mean, we were lucky to fall into video very early. We went into North Korea and shot an illegal documentary on point-and-shoot cell phones. And compared to video technology now, it looks terrible. It's not, you know, HD, but it's we see that have a totally new life every 8 or 9 months or so, because it's a recurring important story. It's fascinating to people around the world, and so we're constantly monitoring that. How do we restoke the fire? How do we come out with new stuff around it? How do we, you know, engage people's new interests as that real world story develops? And
do you stack content that's similar, you know, to address the Netflix binge viewing phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, we do. We are really invested in all of the platforms. YouTube in particular, I mean, we see stuff that was put up 3 years ago that will have a million views, you know, in a 3-day span. And yeah, we have to be ready to just kind of jump in to that conversation and have new stuff to add.
From a mobile app perspective, we work with a lot of brands who produce like little mini games. And you know, as they're kind of going through the creative process, they come to us around how do we distribute this and get a bit of a viral effect, you know, drive it up to the charts so you get like a big push on iOS or an Android. And our general advice to them is don't expect a second life. You know, have a budget for this that has a single life, get it out there, get some buzz, one-time shot. If you get a second shot, that's great.
Yeah, and I would say create content that we as your media partner are equally invested in, so that when it does have that second life, we want to jump in and do the help.
Do you have when it's going to have a second life? I mean, is it just start happening and you have to jump on it immediately, or is there like a little bit of
case to case?
But here's some examples.
There's one. We'd made our science vertical called Motherboard. Did a story on what are called tardigrades, which are microscopic organisms that are capable of living in outer space. So it gets into the question of where are they from, or whatever. And yeah, it's been online for a while, and it went from maybe 500,000 to 10 million views in 2 days. I mean, and yeah, we didn't have a moment to anticipate it. But so then, yeah, we had to jump into gear and be able to do it. In other ones, you can see a slow build as stories develop.
Okay. One more question.
So this is a slightly different topic, but it's mobile. I think we're starting to get to a point where we're starting to see tremendous scale possible on mobile. We see the success Facebook's had, we see the success Google's had. We were in a Yahoo meeting the other day talking about how, you know, the amount of time people are spending on Yahoo mobile is outpacing what's on the PC now. But at the same time, when I hear people talking about millennials and what they're doing on their mobile devices, I hear a lot about how, you know, I've definitely been hearing lately about how millennials and younger folks have just started to abandon Facebook, right? Do you believe that there will be the ability to have scalable platforms on the mobile, in mobile, or do you believe we're going to be essentially facing in the next 10 years a much more fragmented, everything is you know, maybe reaches a penetration of 13, 14% US, and everybody's using multiple things? Like, Tom, where do you see that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I think in general, I think you're kind of on Facebook that I know people even my age are seeing it as just way too cluttered. You know, it's like I was saying before, it's these single little platforms that do just the one thing, just win, and everybody just clicks into the app and it's over. Well, right, because it's just, and it's a lot of times it's bogged down with ads. It's a lot of times it's bogged down with people saying bullshit about whatever, you know, and people just don't want to hear all that stuff anymore. I mean, I think Facebook is just going to be kind of the identity gatekeeper on the internet. They've already got 1 million, how many names do they have already that have people's bios, everything online? I think in later years it's just going to become that turnkey to get into the internet and the accountability on the internet. But that being said, the fragmentation, I think there will be another Instagram, in a couple of years. There will be another Snapchat in a couple of years. It's right, exactly. And
well, I think that's the point. It's not. I don't think that there's like this artificial cap on penetration rates. It's just the penetration rate will shift between apps.
Right.
Well, you were just talking about draw something. Just the other, what was the shelf life on Draw Something? You know, it got how many users
It got
like
up to
that?
it got up to
And
50
then,
million
right, and then
DAU.
and then it fell off kind of the face of the earth.
Yep.
You know, I'm sure people have it installed, but it's kind of the new thing. You know, like what's the new thing?
And I think from a marketing standpoint, that's got to be really interesting in the way that you think about marketing on mobile, right? Because you just start to see these big organizations where you can capitalize and drive real results, and all of a sudden now you realize what you have to do is start chasing these trends of where people are at, you know, and that's real time. That's very real time marketing. Right?
I think, in my opinion, it's going to be like right now, marketers are balanced between the major broadcast channels and digital. They're just starting to really get digital into the fray. I think that, you know, Facebook, the big platforms are going to continue to be relevant, but what they're going to be is Time Warner Cable. You know, you're not going to care about them, but that's how you get your TV.
I think you still need to scale, right? Like you need to scale, but you need the personalization and going to these like emerging platforms that are up and coming. Like you can't just do one. You got to be thinking about both and like a balance of it. Because you're right. I mean, if you were just to look at these, you know, single like Instagram or Snapchat, and I don't know what advertising opportunities are there today, but you're not going to scale if that's what you're trying to do. So you're going to have to balance it with the Facebooks of the world.
They're going to be the Verizons and Time Warner Cables. We're going to hate them.
And that point
but they're going to be there.
That point about real time and how you structure to have that flexibility in the partners you're working with is really critical.
But
okay.
One thing I wanted to say.
One parting
the important
thought.
piece we should not forget, really. You may have different verticals, different companies, they come and go, but they may be owned by few companies.
Yes.
And that's a huge point.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you to
Thank
all
you.
of our panelists. Great job.